welcome to my DynamicsCon presentation. Thank you to DynamicsCon and all the folks over there working on this to get this virtual conference set up. This is a pretty neat way to have it pre-recorded, but I will be there for the live Q&A, so please do include any questions in the chat so we can talk about that after the presentation is done. I'm going to be presenting on extending Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations or Finance and Supply Chain with Power Automate. My name is Trisha Alverson. I'm a software solutions architect at Ellipse Solutions. I've been working on Dynamics F&O and AX for over 13 years at this point, really way back since AX4. Ellipse Solutions, where I'm working now, is a full-service Microsoft Dynamics Gold partner. Just to kind of hop through the agenda of what I'll be going over, I'm going to give a quick intro in the slides to Power Automate itself. I'll take a look at a few of the important things to note with extending D365 with Power Automate specifically. We'll take a look at the Power Platform environment you would need to create to get started with all of this, and just some kind of tips and the generic steps of creating your flow using templates, which is what I'll be actually demoing. Then I'm going to jump into the demo because it's just better with this to show and tell. And I'll be demoing email approvals. I'm going to be using a workflow that's out of the box from D365, and we will use that Power Automate to create actionable email approvals for you in that. And then, as time permits, hopefully I'll be able to even update the flow on the fly and add some Teams channel posts. So jumping in right off the bat to Power Automate. Power Automate, this is based on a no-code, low-code platform. So meaning you don't have to be a developer to do this. You can be a power user, a business end user, as long as you've got an understanding of your systems and what you're trying to do. That should get you most of the way there. Power Automate is really nice for automating business processes. You can do things like send automatic reminders, move business data between systems. Best thing, out of the box, there are more than 500 connectors. And so I've got a little quick screenshot there where you can see several of the Microsoft type softwares that are going to be supported for connections and some of the common things you'd be wanting to connect between. Now, it's not just cloud. You can actually also automate local computer tasks as well. Some of the use cases for using Power Automate, you can automate approval workflows. Approval workflow is what we'll be using along with D365 standard workflow in order to send the notifications by email and make them actionable. Another use case is creating records in D365 or other databases. You can receive notifications using Power Automate. Notifications could be used, for example, from D365 alerts when records are created. A flow can be triggered. You can also update teams automatically, which I will demo as well. Copying files is a nice use case as well. Copying files could be like saving all of your email attachments to a OneDrive folder, or copying files to SharePoint automatically. So many business teams are using that nowadays, so it's helpful to automate some of those tasks that take up your time. And I've got some quick screenshots of some fun examples where you can tie into Twitter and monitor hashtags or mentions, and here you can see that those tweets are automatically saved into an Excel document. So just some fun things you could do. A quick introduction to the Power Automate UI. You see here that on your left column, you've got the most important is going to be My Flows. Here's where you would go to also create new flows that you're going to have in your Power Automate. One thing to mention with Microsoft, they're always changing the names of things, so you could see the URL is still us.flow.microsoft.com, even though the name's been changed to Power Automate. And it is, helpful to clarify that still within Power Automate, what you create is called a flow. So another helpful thing I've got here in this screenshot is that it shows where you can actually look through the different templates and connectors that are available out of the box. Very helpful for not having to start from scratch on everything, especially if you're new to learning the environment. You've got, data to access entities, connections, custom connectors, all of that right there in your left column. And also from here, you can actually monitor the activity of both cloud and desktop flows, which is really nice. And another quick thing to call out, in the top right, you do see your environment listed. And again, I'll show that later, that that's your Power Platform environment that you've created. So it's nice to make sure, in case there are different environments within your company and how you're working on there, which environment you're working in. Now that we know it's a flow that you're going to be creating in Power Automate, there are a few different types of flows and some concepts that I want to cover, just so we'll get some of those definitions down. Under the heading of cloud flows, we've got automated flows, which are going to be triggered by an event, such as the arrival of an email or the social media mention we saw from Twitter. In the example I'm going to demo, my trigger is going to be a D365FO business event. Another option is instant flows, and these start with like the click of a button. So examples would be buttons created in, say, the mobile app. A funny example is if you want a button in the mobile app to notify your boss you're sick and automatically block out your calendar for the whole day. So that would be an example of an instant flow. Another type is scheduled flows. And scheduled flows, for example, would be like a daily update to your teams, or updating a database automatically. You know, I know the project managers out there like would love to automatically just post their note to their team. Hey, make sure you guys are on top of stuff, and just automate that to be every day. Besides the cloud flows, you can have desktop flows, and that can automate web or desktop tasks. Business process flows are flows like a guide of steps for someone doing work or their job or a business process. So that actually can guide you through those things. And that's a business process flow. A few other concepts just to mention. I kind of mentioned a trigger. And triggers are what start the automated Power Automate flow. And so again, I've got the screenshot because the example I'm going to use is an F&O business event. And I'll give a brief overview of that when we get to that point in the demo. Actions are the second part. For example, sending an email or posting to teams, whatever action you want to happen in your flow at each step. Another important thing to note is connections. If you're using a template, the connections will be automatically added. You can also add connections manually, of course. And like I mentioned, hundreds of connectors out of the box to connect to, various systems like D365FO, other flavors of Dynamics, and especially all of the other Microsoft products. There's a lot of connectors for all of that. Another cool thing with Power Automate, there is a mobile app, and this can just be downloaded from the normal app store. Then you just sign in with your standard credentials. From here, it's really nice. You have your activity feed of any flows that are running for you. You can manage them, do anything like that. You've got your buttons, like I joked about your boss button notifying your boss you're sick. And the cool thing, you can even modify or delete a flow right from the mobile app. So if you're a bit, techie, you might have some fun with the mobile app to be able to mess with the flows. But it is kind of cool. The example I'm going to be showing with approvals does automatically interact with the mobile app, where you could do your approvals from there. A couple quick things too to mention. Troubleshooting is always going to be something you have to deal with. So with Power Automate, granted it's low code, no code, there's still some problems you can run into as you're building those flows. So you want to come into your website that we're using to build our flow. You can also monitor your cloud flow activity right from there. Monitoring the activity can also be done from that mobile app I mentioned. Steps that failed in your flow will have that red exclamation. So you can see these steps here in this screenshot where the first two passed with your green check mark, but then your compose step failed with the red exclamation. And then you're going to be able to look at your error details, review those error messages, check for any authentication failures. Some of the things, there's going to be authentication errors, might have some kind of error message that includes the word unauthorized. Usually that's kind of fixed by updating the connection or something common like that. Another thing to look out for is if it says bad request or not found, and some of those things could, help you identify what type of error you've got, a 400 or a 404. Another note I want to put out there, since I kind of mentioned you could tie into something like Twitter, some external connectors like that may actually throttle to control the quality of service. So just a few notes there if you're troubleshooting or running into some problems. D365FO integration, let's talk through a few of those notes. So I mentioned the trigger I'm going to use is a business event. So if you're in F&O, you can find your business events in your business event catalog. And that's going to be under your system administrative module under setup business events. And this is going to show you all of your business events that are automatically generated, and those are going to be for workflows, alerts, and it'll show all of your custom business events as well. It's important to note that you can also see there will be a second tab for endpoints, and those will be shown here too. Another important note, if you're actually doing custom business events, which would be a whole nother presentation, you would be able to come here and, for example, download the schema that would be needed to use in your Power Automate flow. For example, you would come here and there's going to be a button to automatically download the schema, and the schema is what's going to contain the fields that are passed to that business event. So that's helpful for knowing how you can use that in your flow. It's also nice that there is an error list here in the business event catalog, helpful especially in custom business events or more complex situations. Just to show what I'm going to do for the demo, I'm going to use the vendor invoice journal, and I'm going to use this workflow that's out of the box. So this is under accounts payable, and no customization is required. For the demo, I did have to set the approver to myself, just so I could play with it and be the one to submit it and also approve it. One thing to note is that it does work best if the approver is in the same domain as the flow. Otherwise, it kind of actually would have to open Power Automate app to do the approval instead of it being directly actionable from the email like I'm going to demonstrate. Power Automate's flow also can be exported as a template. So for example, like workflows, if you're going to have them used in other legal entities within F&O, or for other workflows within D365, if you want to use the same Power Automate flow, that's when you can export it as a template, and we'll look at that a little bit too. So before you would be able to go through, the steps I'm going to show in the demo, the first thing you would need to do is create a Power Platform environment. Now, even though we're not creating a Power App or anything, as complex as that, we do need this environment to create our Power Automate flow. So when creating this new environment, in the example like we're going to be using today, I created the environment without a database, as that's not needed. I'm not creating an app that's going to store any data. I'm just creating a flow connecting to F&O. So let's take a look at actually creating that flow. I am a big fan of not recreating the wheel, right? We want to start from a template if we can, especially if you're learning. This is a great way to learn what exists and how you can use it. In order to do that, you would click on the new flow, as you can see in my screenshot, and you have a couple options. And so for the example I'm using, I did start from a template. And the nice thing is once you actually get into that template search, you can search fin and ops. Again, like the Microsoft things, the names change quicker than the actual applications can keep up with. So I know the name has changed, but fin and ops is a great way to search for the templates and the connectors for D365 F&O. Even though the template is a great starting point, you will need some values to be set within it, and I'll take a look at those in my flow. The template also includes the connectors, which is super helpful, so you don't have to, try and figure that out your very first time. And then you can even customize it to add any extras, do whatever you want to the flow, and save it as your own new template. So here's just a quick screenshot that shows how you can actually export or save those flows once you've got them created. Under that export button, you can see the options, package, Logic Apps template. Package is nice because it includes connectors and everything, so it can be imported to a different Power Platform environment even. Template is useful for quickly creating flows for business events triggered from, say, different legal entities or different workflows if you've already got your Power Automate flow set up for that. And then also separately, you do see a Save As button. Save As creates a copy of your flow. So that's nice if in the same environment, you can leave some of your flows disabled as you're working through them, but want to keep them maybe as a reference to be able to make some small tweaks as you're doing things. So once in a while, it's nice to use the save as to keep a copy. So enough of the intro. Let's look at the demo. So I'm gonna move over to my browser here, and we'll take a look at some of the stuff, Power Platform admin and some other areas as I get these sessions refreshed. So to start, like I mentioned, you need to create that Power Platform environment. You would do that in the Power Platform Admin Center, which is just admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. And so you can see I've got Trisha's environment, and this is what we'll reference in actually the Power Automate site. So now if we look, I'm in us.flow.microsoft.com, and this is going to be for Power Automate. And in the top right, you can see which environment I'm using for these flows. So that's that Trisha Alverson's environment that I created on Power Platform. And some of the stuff that, we looked at in the PowerPoint, you can see that I've got my flows, and here I've got a cloud flow created for this demo. And if I click on it, you get some overview. This is where I've got the details. You can see your connectors in a snapshot, and you can even see your run history. So to start, what I had to do was I did have to set up the accounts payable workflow I'm going to use. So I'm going to use the vendor invoice journal workflow. And again, all I did was set the approver to myself. No customization needed on the F&O side. I created my Power Platform environment without a database for this example. And then I did go into Power Automate and created my new flow from a template. And I was able to search FinOps. Once you've got your flow, you can see that my trigger, which is going to be this first step here, it's got kind of a symbol that shows you what connector it's using, so that's really helpful in guiding you. So you can see this is going to be the connector right to F&O, and the trigger is when a business event occurs. And that's again where we can look at this business event catalog. And so this is my actual business event catalog in my environment, and I'll very quickly search to find that I've got my vendor invoice approval journal business events here. And again, this is where you could see that you could download the schema if you were going to manually import that into your flow and use it. The other thing that's nice is the endpoint here is automatically created. And so when you're going into your flow, if you've created this from the template, all you actually need to do is set your environment, which is the instance, that's your F&O URL, the category, which for this is going to be a workflow work item, because that's what we're going to be basing most of the steps in the flow off of. You actually select your business event that you've got created in F&O. Again, for the workflows, those are automatically created, but you could use custom business events as well. And then you select your legal entity. So that's pretty straightforward just to get the actual trigger of your flow. And from there, what you're going to actually get is based off of that business event schema, you're going to be able to parse the JSON of what you're receiving. And this is pretty straightforward. You don't have to be an expert developer to understand this. It's mostly based on arrays and strings, so pretty plain text readable. This is where you would come if you wanted to be able to, say, filter an array, if you wanted to parse out a specific variable from your schema or do something like that. And the nice thing is, if you're doing any of that filtering or anything more complex as you're parsing out variables and things, it's really similar to Excel formulas. So not much coding is needed. So now that you've parsed out your schema from your business event, you're going to validate that work item. And this is just a validation step in there to make sure the work item, it got triggered correctly and it's validated. And now that we're validating it, we want to add a condition to say, did it, successfully validate? So that's the condition here. And again, in this validation step, it's really easy, especially from the template again. You're setting your instance and your action, which is that you want to validate that work item. Now, if you were customizing this flow further for your own requirements, the cool thing is you can just hit this plus to insert a new step. And so again, this is where you would add an action that you want to happen. And when you choose that, you'll see that it automatically gives you lots of suggested actions, different categories, and you can always search here. And this is again where you would want to search, say FinOps or something like that. A lot of, the common things, for example, you might insert a step that if you're using extending F&O, a lot of it's going to be similar to your CRUD operations that you're used to: create, read, update, delete. And just to mention too, on the back end of F&O, that's using data entities. So as long as you've got your entities set up for whatever data you're trying to work with your CRUD operations, you're going to be all set to go. So for this example where I'm using, the journal workflow, common thing you might insert here would be a step to, say, look up the journal records so you could get even more details from that journal to send in your email. So say this is going to be an approval of an invoice journal, and the executive receiving this email only cares if it's a $1 million journal or something like that. So you'd want to make sure to read that record and get the important things like totaling the amount or some things like that. And you can use again those Excel like formulas to total that and use these steps to read any of those records and get any of that information that you want to send in your email. So once we've validated, of course, if the validation fails, we're going to send an email notification so that we're not just leaving everyone hanging. And this is where you can put in some of those dynamic variables that you parsed out in your JSON. And that would be, you know, the workflow information, any instructions, any comments, and really cool links back to the F&O sites. So on the fun side, if your validation does pass, you're going to want to start and wait for an approval. And again, this is really nice. You aren't creating, you know, the approval kind of framework from scratch. So you could see here my icon. This is using the Power Automate approvals connector and framework. Here, all we need to do is to use the flow approval, and this is going to send the actionable email using workflow info right from D365. So you can see it's going to be the approval type, response actions. A lot of this is going to be filled out from the template. You can see it's going to get assigned by, again, parsing those variables out from the JSON. It's going to be the workflow user it should get assigned to. And the important thing here is the details. This is going to be the body of the email. So again, you're going to be using values from that entity record to have any of the instructions, your comments that get passed with your workflow, and of course, a link to the actual journal, which is really nice. And this actually will include buttons to do your approvals or your rejections and allow you to comment right in your email, so you'll never have to open F&O to participate in this workflow. The way that works is then your next step would be to apply to each. So this is, once you've got your approval started, it's going to take that response from the previous step, so whether that's an approve or a reject, and then it's going to go back and execute an action. And again, you can see by this icon that's going to execute in F&O. And what it's going to do is, here you've got your URL referenced again, and it's going to complete the work item. So this is going to take the response, and for example, if it's the approval, it's going to actually then complete and approve that journal in F&O without you ever having to go into F&O. So now that we've kind of walked through, we see that we've got our run history here too with our successful actions. And the nice thing is you can actually see the progress while it's running. So I'm going to go ahead and create a quick journal to show how we can look at the flow while it's working. So I'm just going to create just kind of a dummy invoice journal, and we're going to pretend that I've entered lines with a bunch of amounts, and if, you know, we had wanted to, we could customize all of that info to pull into our email, but I'm going to keep it super simple for the demo. And so I've got my journal created with my pretend lines that I added, and I'm going to go ahead and submit it to workflow like I normally would in F&O. I'm going to say, please approve, keep it simple. So this is all standard F&O workflow at this point, and I submit it. And from here, we can look at our workflow history in F&O like we normally would, and hopefully it'll go relatively quick enough, and we'll see the work items get created, that this is going to get assigned to this approver, which is myself in this case, and then we'll see how it's going to go and trigger our Power Automate flow as well. So I'll just wait a few seconds for this to load. All right, now we've got that going. So you could see it was submitted by me, and this is also assigned to me. And now we've got that. That's our work item that's created. That's what is going to have our business event trigger our flow. So now if we come here back to Power Automate and look here in our run history, we can see we've got a flow running. And the nice thing to see while it's running, you can see exactly what step it's going through. And not only that, you can actually see the raw inputs and outputs of each step in the process while it's running live. So that's really helpful if you're troubleshooting and you can see what exactly information you're getting, what information is getting set to what values in your arrays and strings here, and how you can parse that out if you need to. What I would expect here is that our work item is successfully validated, which it is with this green check. And so we would hope that it would come down into our if yes. And now it's saying start and wait for an approval. So this is when we hope that it has sent an email. And here we go. I've got an email action needed for the AP invoice approval. It's got the journal batch number. Again, this is where you could customize any other information you want to provide in the, in the body of your email. I've just got it really simple with the workflow, any instructions, and of course the comment to approve this journal. Here's a link that you'd be able to open the journal if you wanted to look in more detail. But say we're really busy and you know what we saw, oh, we'll pretend we saw the dollar amount was, not too bad. We're familiar with that vendor, whatever. I'm going to go right here and approve it. And so this is what's way cooler than, someone who's not in F&O all day, but is just needed for these workflow approval steps. They can actually do this right from their email, give any comments. And again, you could request changes or reject it with your comments here as well, and send that right back. And so once I hit submit, you can see that actually dynamically in the email, it changes so you wouldn't accidentally say, try to approve the same submission over and over again or something like that. So now we can see that it's come back and it's successfully applied to each, and it should go back and update that journal using the workflow work item and complete it. So if we come back here and refresh our workflow history, you can see the work item approval by who, and you can see even the comment. But here's the key thing, you see external work item completion. So it was completed externally from F&O by our Power Automate flow. So that's a really cool, simple way of seeing the flow exist. So let's go ahead and actually try and quickly come back and on the fly edit our flow to show that it really is low code, no code. And I'm going to say add a step that posts to a specific Teams channel once the approval comes through. Say, the boss approves it, you want to notify a whole team, in AP that they're good to go to take their next steps. So I'm going to go within my apply to each. This is only in, obviously, if it's validated, and within my apply to each, I'm going to add an action. I'm going to go right to the Teams category, and I'm going to look for post a message in a chat or a channel, because I just want to post a success message just to show how it could work. So I'm going to go ahead and post this message in a separate channel. So you see there's not a lot of things I need to set. I'm going to let it post as the Flowbot. And now I could just automatically select what channel I want to post in. So I've got my team demo set up, and I'm just going to post in the general channel here. And I'm going to say, yay. And hopefully I'll be able to just save this, and here we go. Your flow is ready to go. We recommend you test it. So let's just run a quick test again with a new journal. So again, I'm just creating an invoice journal here. I'm going to pretend I've added lines and put all of the necessary information in, and I'm going to submit it to my workflow and say, please approve, and then auto post to Teams. Well, let's go ahead and submit that. And then again, we'll go look in our history, and hopefully it'll run a little bit quicker as it's the second one. So again, assigned to me. And the other cool thing to mention is that using these out-of-the-box approvals, not only does it email, but it also actually notifies you in Teams. And you can click right from the Teams approvals framework as well to do that approve. My flow should be running, and we see I've got that one running here, and I've got my email. And I'm going to quickly approve that and say approved. And let's go ahead and submit that. And then hopefully this will successfully finish running. And so we see it's going into my condition. We've got to wait for an approval. Now we're applying it. So we expect it to not only go back and update the journal in F&O, but also post a message in my Teams channel. So here's my demo channel. And you can see it automatically posted via Power Automate. Yay, it worked. And again, here it would be really easy to include a link back to the journal. You can see I've done that in previous messages where it's got the actual URL, which is long and ugly. You can obviously format that in any way you need and handle that, but it is just kind of cool to show how you can automate that and how so much out of the box with the connectors and the templates gets you most of the way there. And then you can, just kind of tweak it a little bit to meet your actual requirements. So, of course, I'm sure, there may be lots of questions, so please include any questions in the chat as we go through this. From here, I just want to say thank you And again, feel free to email me, talverson@ellipsesolutions.com. And hopefully, we're about to have a great conversation and discussion with any of your questions. Well, I just want to say thanks to everyone for coming, and I think we've got a couple questions coming through already, so I'm excited to hopefully be able to answer and discuss anything further that came up from looking at the setup there and all of those demos.
Yep,
So
I'll try to walk you through. I'll just go in order here.
yeah, excellent.
First question we got that came through is for users that are not really familiar with it. What is the general time to getting a power extension set up?
It's a good question. So I'll admit there's a lot of factors at play. It's going to depend on your background. It is low code, no code. So if your scenario is that you're not familiar with it at all, maybe you're a power user, your first one is going to take a lot longer than subsequent times. And again, like I mentioned in my presentation, I recommend using a template, especially if it's your first time. Starting from the template, I think you can get your first one up and running within a day if you go nice and slow and you follow all the steps. And it's something as robust as the one I demoed. And then obviously, maybe the next time if you copy it just to set it up for another legal entity or something, you'll have it done in an hour. So it's definitely a learning curve. And then, of course, the complexity within it, if you're going to really be parsing it out and using a lot more of those like formula-based logic to total or do things like that, that's when I've seen it get a little finicky and take a little bit of extra time just to get everything working exactly the way you expect it. But following the templates is definitely the way to start and get you up and running really quickly.
Awesome. So next question from Sharif here. If the workflow has to follow a hierarchy, could we pull it from F&O to flow?
Yes. So the cool thing is because when we looked at the step where it was parsing directly from those work events, it is going to parse the users that you have set up, however you have it set up in your workflow. So whichever users it's going to get sent to, that's going to get pulled into those steps in your Power Automate flow, and it's going to send that to the users. And it would follow any of the rules you have set up from F&O, and that's kind of what's getting passed to Power Automate there. So all of the stuff, if you have a more complex workflow setup on the F&O side, Power Automate will follow along with that based on those business events that are going to be passed back and forth.
Is there a marketplace for adding business events to F&O, or is the only way to get more business events to develop custom business events?
I don't know that there's a marketplace per se, but you will see a lot of them there out of the box for things like workflows. All of them will be there out of the box. Alerts, and those type of events will already be in your business event catalog. But besides that, you would have to customize it. If it's a completely custom process that you've coded with custom code extensions, that's where you would then have to create the code necessary as well to create the custom business event. But if it's anything out of the box, it more than likely has the business event already created for you.
Get through here. Sorry, scrolling here. Is it possible to determine approvers based on cost center / purchase category criteria?
I kind of missed the first part, but I'm thinking like, that might be more on the F&O side in your normal workflow setup with what criteria you're going to use to determine how it goes to those approvers, because you kind of set up that logic. If you've ever seen on the F&O side the workflow editor, you see like almost like those Visio diagrams of where it's going to flow to, and you can put your conditions right in your F&O workflow to determine who's going to be the approver. And then you don't have to change anything on the Power Automate side once you've got the F&O workflow set up to work exactly how you want. That's going to pass along in those business events to, whichever approver the workflow has. That's what's going to get passed up to Power Automate, and it'll use that to email the correct person.
Okay. I think it was a follow-up here. What if the approvers are outside finance organization and they have no access to D365?
So that gets tricky, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head how you would even set that up in F&O, because most of the time it's going to be based on users in F&O, because the workflow itself is normally encapsulated within F&O. So if you want to do stuff external, you'd have to get that working in F&O, and if you can get that working, then whatever value you're using there is what you'd want to just make sure is getting passed in your business event. If it's just an email address, and that's in, F&O, then it'll get passed to Power Automate. So it's basically as complex as you can get it working in F&O as your normal workflow. You can pass any of that data to Power Automate in that schema that we kind of looked at, where it's going to pass that, which fields it's passing. But even besides the fields it's passing in that basic schema, you could always use any of those like CRUD activities to go look up another record that's related to what you're doing. So that's another thing we've seen with those kind of customizations, is if you've got a journal header and you need more details from the lines, that's easy to look up within Power Automate, but that'd be more for, in this example, of sending that info in the email or something like that. So all of the conditionals and approvers you'd want to set up on the F&O side.
Gotcha. Another one here. Can we do custom business events like sales order confirm, customer credit status changed?
Absolutely. So as long as you've got the custom business event set up and you see it in your business event catalog, you can use that with Power Automate. And the other thing too, I think it was kind of shown briefly, was the endpoint. So just making sure it's got the endpoint set up in your business event catalog too. It's just a secondary tab there. When you use like the template that I used for that demo, it had automatically created that endpoint. So it's just another thing you would double check. If you've got a custom business event, make sure you see it listed and you've got your endpoint set up correctly as well. And from there, you'll see it in those drop downs. Because of the connector is direct to F&O, you'll see that new custom business event listed right in your drop down when you're setting up your Power Automate flow. Good question.
So I got a couple more here. And if I've missed anybody's in the earlier chat, feel free to repost or ask new questions. Got a couple more though. What has been your experience with the long-term reliability of these flows?
So, we're honestly on the partner side. So long-term, we've more handed them over. So I have to do a little bit of an assumption that if I haven't been getting complaints or troubleshooting requests, that, it's been going well. So, for the most part, we've helped set them up and gone from there. I don't know why my video looks like it cut out, but that's the long term. So far, it's been pretty steady. And I'm sure that depends on the complexity too, and as things change in F&O, keeping everything up to date and in sync.
Well, no complaints is good.
Yeah.
It's a good sign. So what kind of licensing do users need, especially the users that do approvals?
So the licensing is going to be actually for your Power Automate, and that's based on Office 365 licensing. So that's a good question. So it's not going to be per the users doing the approvals, which is nice because you don't want to have to worry about how many different people do you have set up in your workflow and that kind of thing. So it's just based on your Office 365 licensing, can you create the Power Platform environment and get your flow and everything set up. So it's not going to be based on who's using the flow, which is really nice.
Got another one from Alex here. So if I were to create a workflow against some part of our purchase order process, it would generate business events?
Yes. Yep. If it's an out of the box workflow, it should generate those business events. And so like you can go to that business event catalog right in your F&O environment, and you'll see tons of them listed, and it'll list them per legal entity and per workflow. So you can actually search there and find them.
Awesome. So can we do this with timesheet posted?
Is that a? I'm not sure. I'm not familiar
Right.
with that, so I don't know if that's a workflow.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's a workflow out of the box, then yes.
Alrighty. And is it the F&O calling Power Automate or Power Automate polling F&O regularly?
It's a good question. So in this case, the Power Automate is waiting for that business event to be the trigger. So there are different types of Power Automate flows, but in this specific type, it is triggered by that business event. So, you could see in your Power Automate like admin setter, you'll see the different runs there, and it's not going to happen until that business event gets actually triggered from F&O. So in F&O, as soon as I hit submit and you go to your workflow history and you see that it's actually been submitted, that's it creating that business event, and that's what Power Automate's waiting for in order to trigger.
Should standard endpoints be visible in D365 to correspond with the business event catalog?
The endpoint won't be like the automated ones won't be visible, I think, until you start setting up your Power Automate flow, because it's that connection to Power Automate that'll generate the automated endpoint. I'm saying automate a lot. That's how it worked with the templates, at least for sure. So then there aren't a long list of endpoints already there out of the box. So it's not like if you go look and you don't see all the endpoints, you're in trouble. It's just that you haven't actually set up that integration yet.
Awesome. And could you provide some examples of flows you have seen used by clients?
So far, this is one of the most common one. I've seen they get more complex. We've had flows that combine in with Power Apps that we've created, where you've got a more complex Power App, and then you can actually put a flow within that Power App if there's some kind of CRUD operation within integrating to F&O that you want to handle with Power Automate. So that's the second most common, is I've seen it used where it's a smaller piece of a bigger puzzle, and that's an overall Power App that we're creating for a pretty big end-to-end business process.
Okay, I think we're down to the last question here, which is perfect because we're running short on time. Can you pass on journal number to the Teams channel, or maybe the invoice value?
Absolutely. So that's one of those things where we saw we were parsing our JSON. So if you want to have some of those other key fields, you would have to parse your JSON and you would assign it to like a variable. And then that variable would be available to put in, say, the body of the email you're sending to the approver, or the body of the text you're posting to Teams. When you look up that. So that's, we've done that exact example. And even if that record is, or that field is on a record related to the record, you can again do a lookup of a related record by reading it in from the flow, and then again parsing out that value you want for the journal number, and you can make the journal number a link back to F&O to the actual journal, all that cool stuff. So, and all that again with pretty low code to be able to parse that into your fields that you could pull into your body, your email, or your other text. Good question.
And oh yeah, one more in here. We'll see if we can fit this in.
Okay.
Have you seen anyone create a flow for new product creation?
I haven't personally seen it, but it sounds like a good example, because that's something that a lot of the people outside of F&O might be interested in being notified about. And again, the key thing I think with Power Automate is that you can make it actionable. You can do other kind of normal notifications from F&O, but making those emails or Teams posts actionable is what's really cool with Power Automate, where someone doesn't have to get back into F&O to complete the process.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think, are we about at the end of the time?
Yep, I think we're at the end of the time. So I obviously know you're fantastic, Trisha, but I think everybody really enjoyed this. There's a lot of great questions. So
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah, thanks for all the questions.